The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps as Serena sat in the hard wooden chair, her hands trembling as she watched the man she had loved for 8 years destroy her life with cold, calculated words. James stood at the plaintiff's table in his expensive navy suit, the one she had bought him for their anniversary, pointing an accusing finger at her while his lawyer painted her as a thief, a liar, and a woman who had contributed nothing to their success. Your Honor, my client built this business from the ground up while the defendant sat at home, contributing nothing but complaints and demands for money, James's lawyer said with practiced ease. Mrs. Carter has no legal claim to assets she never helped create. In fact, we have evidence she embezzled funds and damaged the company's reputation through her erratic behavior. Serena's stomach dropped as she heard her own husband, the man she had sacrificed everything for, nod in agreement. The same man who used to hold her close and whisper how grateful he was for her support now wouldn't even look in her direction. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of building something together, and this was how it ended. Not with love or even basic respect, but with him trying to steal everything she had given him. The judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom like a death sentence as he called for a brief recess. Serena stumbled out into the hallway, her breath coming in short gasps as the reality of her situation hit her like a freight train. How had she gotten here? How had the fairy tale become such a nightmare? Her mind drifted back to that spring morning 8 years ago when she first met James at the little coffee shop on 5th Street. She had been 26 then, full of hope and ambition, working as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized firm. She had savings in the bank, a reliable car, and dreams of starting her own business someday. James had been sitting alone at a corner table, frantically typing on an old laptop that looked like it might die at any moment. "Excuse me," he had said, flashing that charming smile that would later become her weakness. "You wouldn't happen to have a phone charger, would you? Mine just died and I'm in the middle of the most important presentation of my life." She had helped him that day as she would help him every day for the next 8 years. She had given him her charger, then her phone number, then her heart. Within months, she was paying for his business cards and logo design. Within a year, she had quit her stable job to work for his company full-time without pay. Within 3 years, she had invested her entire inheritance, every penny her grandmother had left her, into expanding his dream. And now here she was, watching him try to take even that away from her. "Mrs. Carter?" Her lawyer, Lisa Chin, appeared at her elbow with a concerned expression. "Are you all right? I know this is difficult, but we need to stay focused. His accusations are completely baseless and we have the evidence to prove it." Serena nodded, wiping away tears she didn't remember shedding. "I just don't understand how he can sit there and lie like that. He knows what I did for him. He knows what I sacrificed." "Men like James only remember what serves them," Lisa said grimly. "But the truth has a way of coming out. We just need to make sure the judge hears it." As they walked back into the courtroom, Serena caught sight of James whispering with his lawyer. For just a moment, their eyes met across the room. She saw nothing there, no regret, no shame, no acknowledgement of what they had once meant to each other. Just cold calculation and the confidence of a man who thought he had already won. But Serena had learned something important during those 8 years of marriage. She had learned that sometimes the people you love most are the ones who hurt you deepest. She had learned that kindness could be mistaken for weakness, and generosity could be seen as stupidity. Most importantly, she had learned that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. James had just shown her exactly who he was, and she was finally ready to believe it. The bailiff called the court back to order and Serena straightened her shoulders. She had built one business from nothing. She could certainly destroy the man who was trying to steal it from her. This wasn't just about money or property anymore. This was about justice. And Serena intended to get every bit of it. 8 years earlier, on a Tuesday morning that would change her life forever, Serena Williams had been running late for work when she decided to grab coffee from the little shop on 5th Street instead of making her usual stop at the chain store near her office. She was 26, successful in her marketing coordinator position, and proud of the life she had built for herself after growing up in a single-parent household where money was always tight. The coffee shop was crowded and she almost missed him entirely. James Carter sat hunched over a battered laptop in the corner, surrounded by crumpled papers and empty sugar packets. His hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and he had the desperate look of a man fighting against time itself. "Excuse me," he said, looking up as she passed his table. "I hate to bother you, but my laptop is dying and I don't have a charger. You wouldn't happen to have one, would you? I'm supposed to present my business plan to investors in 2 hours, and if I can't finish this presentation..." His voice trailed off, but Serena could hear the panic underneath his polite request. She looked at his laptop, an ancient Dell that probably belonged in a museum, and then at his face. There was something appealing about his vulnerability, something that made her want to help. "I have one in my car," she heard herself saying. "Let me go get it." 20 minutes later, she was sitting across from him, watching him frantically type while explaining his business idea between gulps of coffee. James wanted to start a home renovation company that specialized in eco-friendly materials and sustainable practices. It was a good idea, she realized, especially with more people becoming environmentally conscious. "The problem is capital," he admitted, finally looking up from his screen. "I have the knowledge and the passion, but I don't have the money to get started. No credit, no collateral, no family to loan me anything. Just this presentation and a prayer." "What about small business loans?" Serena asked. James laughed bitterly. "Have you seen my credit score? Let's just say it's not loan-friendly. I made some mistakes in college and I'm still paying for them." Something about his honesty touched her. Here was a man with a dream but no way to achieve it, asking for nothing but a laptop charger. She found herself genuinely interested in his plans, asking questions about his target market and pricing strategy. Her marketing background kicked in, and she started suggesting ways he could reach potential customers. "You really think this could work?" he asked, his eyes lighting up with hope. "I think it could be huge," she said honestly. "Green renovation is the future. You just need to position yourself right." They talked for another hour, long past the time when Serena should have been at work. James was charming and passionate, painting pictures of the company he wanted to build and the difference he wanted to make. When he asked for her number so he could update her on how the presentation went, she gave it to him without hesitation. That evening he called to tell her the investors had passed. "They said the idea was good but I didn't have enough experience or capital to make it work," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I'm sorry," Serena said, and she meant it. "But this doesn't have to be the end. There are other ways to start a business." "Like what?" "I literally have $300 in my checking account." "You start small," she said. "You do one project at a time. You build a reputation. You don't need investors to hang drywall or install energy-efficient windows. But I need tools, materials, insurance, a business license." "How much would that cost?" There was a pause. "Maybe $5,000 to get started properly. But that might as well be $5 million for all the chance I have of getting it." Serena looked at her bank statement, which she had been reviewing when he called. She had $8,000 in savings. Money she had been putting away for a down payment on a condo. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to help someone get started. "What if I helped?" she heard herself saying. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if I invested in your company? $5,000 for a percentage of the business." The silence stretched so long she wondered if the call had dropped. "Serena, I can't ask you to do that. We barely know each other." "You're not asking. I'm offering. I believe in your idea and I think you can make it work. Consider it a business investment." What she didn't say was that she also believed in him. There was something about his passion and determination that reminded her of herself when she had first started climbing the corporate ladder. She knew what it felt like to have big dreams and no way to achieve them. 2 weeks later, they met at the courthouse to file the paperwork for Carter Home Solutions. Serena had written him a check for $5,000, and he had promised to make her a partner once the business was profitable. It seemed like a fair deal at the time. "I won't let you down," he said as they walked out of the building, holding the official paperwork that made his dream a reality. "I'm going to work harder than anyone to make this succeed." "I know you will," she said, and she meant it. Looking back now, sitting in that cold courtroom 8 years later, Serena realized that had been the first of many promises James would break. But at the time, watching him hold those papers with tears in his eyes, she had felt like she was part of something important. She had felt like she was helping to build something that would last. She had been right about building something. She just hadn't realized she would be the one doing all the building while he took all the credit. Within 6 months of starting Carter Home Solutions, Serena's life had completely changed, though she didn't realize how much until it was too late to go back. What had started as a simple investment had become a full-time obsession, and she found herself working longer hours for James's company than she did for her own job. "I need you," James had said during one of their evening phone calls. "This is bigger than I thought it would be. We're getting calls every day, but I can't handle the marketing, the scheduling, the paperwork, and the actual renovation work all by myself. Have you thought about hiring someone?" Serena asked, though she already knew the answer. "With what money? We're barely breaking even as it is. Every dollar we make goes right back into materials and equipment." It was true. Despite steady work, the company was still struggling to build up cash reserves. James was a perfectionist who insisted on using the highest quality materials, which ate into their profit margins. He also had a habit of underestimating job costs, leaving them scrambling to cover expenses. What if I helped more? Serena found herself saying. I could handle the marketing and administrative stuff in the evenings and on weekends. You do that. We're partners, right? Partners help each other. That had been the beginning of the end of her personal life. Every evening after her regular job, Serena would come home to her laptop and spend hours updating the company website, responding to customer emails, scheduling appointments, and managing their social media accounts. Weekends were spent visiting job sites, meeting with potential clients, and handling the bookkeeping that James claimed gave him headaches. Her friends started complaining that they never saw her anymore. Her performance at her day job began to slip as she found herself exhausted and distracted. But every time she thought about pulling back, James would have another crisis that only she could solve. The customer is threatening to leave a bad review because I missed the appointment, he would say. Can you call and smooth things over? You're so much better with people than I am. The supplier is demanding payment up front, but we don't have the cash flow. Can you put it on your credit card? I'll pay you back as soon as we finish the Johnson project. I need someone to pick up the materials while I'm at the Stevens job. Can you take a long lunch and handle it? Each request seemed reasonable by itself. Each favor was temporary, necessary, urgent. But together, they formed a pattern that was slowly consuming her life. Serena was handling customer service, marketing, scheduling, bookkeeping, supply runs, and damage control, while James focused on the actual renovation work and what he called business development, which seemed to involve a lot of expensive lunches and networking events. The breaking point came after 18 months, when Serena's boss called her into his office on a Friday afternoon. Serena, I need to talk to you about your performance lately, Mr. Peterson said, closing the door behind her. You've missed 3 client meetings in the past month, your project reports are consistently late, and yesterday I caught you on a personal call during work hours. I'm sorry, Mr. Peterson. I've been dealing with some personal issues, but I promise it won't happen again. I hope not, because I'd hate to lose you. You're talented, but talent isn't enough if you can't focus on the job. Whatever's going on in your personal life, you need to figure it out before it costs you your career. That weekend, Serena sat James down for a serious conversation. We need to talk about the company, she said. I can't keep doing this. It's affecting my real job. What do you mean? I mean, I'm spending more time working for Carter Home Solutions than I am for the company that actually pays me. My boss just gave me a warning. If this continues, I'm going to get fired. James looked genuinely concerned. I had no idea it was that bad. Maybe we need to hire someone to help with the administrative stuff. We've talked about this before. We don't have the money to hire anyone. Then what do you suggest? Serena took a deep breath. I think I should quit my job and work for the company full-time. What? Serena, that's crazy. You have a good job with benefits and security. A job that I'm about to lose anyway because I'm spending all my time working for free for your company. Our company, he corrected. And it's not forever. Once we get more established, we can afford to pay you a proper salary. How long do you think that will take? James was quiet for a moment. Maybe 6 months? A year at most. We're so close to turning the corner. I can feel it. Against every instinct of self-preservation she had, Serena agreed. She gave her notice at the marketing firm, cashed out her small 401k to cover her personal expenses, and began working full-time for Carter Home Solutions without pay. The next 2 years were a blur of 16-hour days, skipped meals, and sleepless nights. Serena handled everything that didn't involve actually swinging a hammer or installing fixtures. She created marketing campaigns, managed customer relationships, handled all the paperwork, did the bookkeeping, managed their suppliers, and even helped with project planning and design. James, meanwhile, seemed to work less than ever. He would show up to job sites when he felt like it, spend hours at the supply store chatting with other contractors, and frequently disappeared for business lunches that lasted the entire afternoon. When Serena questioned him about it, he would get defensive. I'm building relationships, he would say. This business is all about networking and reputation. Someone has to be the face of the company. And someone has to actually run the company, Serena would reply, but James never seemed to hear that part. The worst part wasn't the long hours or the lack of pay. The worst part was watching James take credit for her work. At networking events, he would talk about his marketing strategies and his customer service philosophy. When clients complimented the company's professionalism and organization, He would smile and accept the praise without mentioning that Serena was responsible for both. But she told herself it was temporary. She told herself they were building something together, and eventually her contributions would be recognized and rewarded. She told herself that love meant sacrifice, and that supporting your partner's dreams was what good wives did. She had no idea that while she was sacrificing everything to build his company, James was already planning how to cut her out of it entirely. The phone call came on a rainy Thursday morning in October, 3 years after Serena had quit her job to work full-time for Carter Home Solutions. She was in the middle of reconciling their quarterly tax paperwork when her aunt's voice crackled through the speaker, heavy with grief and exhaustion. "Serena, honey, I have some sad news. Your grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep last night." The pen fell from Serena's hand as the world seemed to tilt sideways. Grandma Rose had been the strongest person she knew, the woman who had raised her mother as a single parent and who had always been Serena's biggest supporter. Even at 87, she had seemed invincible. "I'm so sorry, baby," her aunt continued. "I know how close you two were. The funeral is scheduled for Saturday at Mount Olive Baptist Church." Serena barely remembered the rest of the conversation. She sat in the office she had set up in their spare bedroom, surrounded by invoices and spreadsheets, crying for the woman who had taught her that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle. Grandma Rose had worked as a seamstress for 40 years, saving every penny she could to make sure her family had opportunities she never did. James found her there an hour later, still crying over the scattered paperwork. "Hey, what's wrong?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "My grandmother died," Serena managed between sobs. "She was the only family I had left who really understood me." "I'm so sorry, baby," James said, pulling her into his arms. "I know how much she meant to you." For the next few days, James was the supportive husband she remembered falling in love with. He handled client calls, rescheduled appointments, and took care of all the urgent business matters while she made funeral arrangements and grieved. At the service, he held her hand and spoke beautifully about Grandma Rose's strength and kindness, making Serena remember why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. 2 weeks later, Serena met with her grandmother's lawyer to settle the estate. She had expected maybe a few $1,000s and some family heirlooms. What she got was a shock that left her speechless. "Your grandmother was quite specific about her wishes," the lawyer said, sliding a document across his desk. "She left you her house, her car, and her savings. The total value is approximately $150,000. Serena stared at the number on the page, unable to process what she was seeing. "That's impossible. She lived in a tiny house and drove a car that was 20 years old. The house may be small, but it's in a desirable neighborhood and it's been paid off for 30 years. As for her savings, your grandmother was very frugal and invested wisely. She also had a life insurance policy that named you as the beneficiary." That evening, Serena sat at the kitchen table with the inheritance paperwork spread in front of her, trying to decide what to do with this unexpected windfall. She could buy a house of her own, finally moving out of the cramped apartment she and James had been sharing. She could invest the money for retirement or go back to school or even start her own business. "This changes everything," she said when James got home from a job site. "We could finally have some financial security." James looked at the papers, his eyes widening when he saw the numbers. "Wow. Your grandmother was sitting on a gold mine." "I'm thinking about buying a house," Serena said. "Something with enough space for a proper home office and maybe room to expand if we ever have kids." "That's a great idea," James said, but she could see the wheels turning in his head. Although what? "Well, I was thinking. We have this amazing opportunity with the business right now. The Riverside Development Project wants us to bid on renovating their entire complex, 12 luxury condos. It would be our biggest project ever, but we'd need to expand significantly to handle it." Serena felt a familiar sinking feeling in her stomach. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this inheritance could be the investment that takes Carter Home Solutions to the next level. Instead of us scraping by month to month, we could hire a full crew, buy professional equipment, maybe even get a proper office space." "James, this is my inheritance. This is money my grandmother saved her entire life." "I know, and I'm not asking you to just give it to me. I'm talking about a real investment in our future. If we use this money to expand the business, we could be millionaires within 5 years. And if the business fails? It won't fail. Not with this kind of capital behind it. Serena, we've been struggling because we never had enough startup money. This would change everything." Serena looked at the paperwork again, thinking about her grandmother's tiny house and her 20-year-old car and her carefully darned stockings. Grandma Rose had sacrificed for decades to save this money, probably dreaming of the security it would provide for her granddaughter. "I need to think about it," she said. For the next week, James launched a campaign that would have impressed a politician. He brought home flowers and her favorite takeout. He showed her detailed business plans and projected earnings. He painted pictures of the life they could have once the company was successful. A beautiful house, luxury vacations, financial freedom. "Your grandmother would want you to use this money to build something lasting," he said one evening as they walked through the affluent neighborhood where their dream house would be. She was an entrepreneur herself in her own way. She'd understand that sometimes you have to risk everything to achieve greatness. The argument that finally convinced her was simpler and more personal. "Serena, we've been partners in this business for 3 years. You've worked just as hard as I have, maybe harder. This investment would make you a real partner, not just someone helping out. We could make it official, put your name on everything, give you equal ownership. You'd finally get the recognition you deserve." That was what she had been wanting to hear for 3 years. Not just to be James's helper or supporter, but to be his true partner in building something meaningful. "Okay," she said finally. "But I want legal paperwork. I want to be listed as co-owner of the business. I want my name on the bank accounts and the business license." "Of course," James said, kissing her forehead. "We'll get everything set up properly. This is going to be amazing, Serena. We're going to build an empire together." The next day, Serena transferred $150,000 from her inheritance into the Carter Home Solutions business account. Within a month, they had rented office space, hired 3 full-time employees, purchased professional equipment, and put down deposits on the Riverside development project. "We'll get the partnership paperwork done next week," James promised when she asked about making her ownership official. "I want to focus on getting these new projects started first." Next week became next month, and next month became as soon as things settled down. Every time Serena brought up the legal paperwork, James had a reason why it wasn't the right time. There was always a crisis to handle, a deadline to meet, a client to satisfy. But the business was booming. Within 6 months, they had completed the Riverside project to rave reviews. Within a year, they were booking projects 3 months in advance. Carter Home Solutions had become one of the most successful renovation companies in the city, with annual revenues approaching $2 million. And Serena was still technically just an employee, working without pay, waiting for James to keep his promise about making her a partner. She should have trusted her first instinct and bought the house. By their 5th year in business, Carter Home Solutions had become everything James had promised it would be. They employed 15 full-time workers, had a waiting list of clients, and had been featured in 3 local magazines as one of the city's premier renovation companies. The company that had started with Serena's $5,000 investment and grown with her grandmother's inheritance now generated over $3 million in annual revenue. Serena should have been proud of what they had built together. Instead, she found herself increasingly frustrated and isolated as James seemed to take more credit and give her less respect with each passing month. The Carter Home Solutions team is led by visionary entrepreneur James Carter, read the magazine article that had been published the previous week. There was a full-page photo of James in his expensive suit, standing in front of their latest project, a luxury kitchen renovation that Serena had designed and managed from start to finish. Her name appeared once in the article, in a brief paragraph that described her as operations manager. "Operations manager?" she had said when James showed her the article. "I'm not the operations manager. I'm supposed to be your partner." "You are my partner," James had replied, but his tone was dismissive. "But we can't confuse clients with complicated ownership structures. It's simpler if they see me as the CEO and you as the operations manager." Simpler for who? For everyone. "Look, Serena, I know you're frustrated, but we agreed to wait until the right time to make the ownership official. We're in the middle of our biggest expansion yet. Once we get the new warehouse set up and hire the additional staff, we can sit down with lawyers and get everything sorted out." It was the same promise he had been making for 2 years, always with a different excuse for why now wasn't the right time. Meanwhile, James's lifestyle had changed dramatically. He drove a new BMW, wore custom suits, and had started traveling frequently for what he called business development opportunities. These trips were always to luxury destinations, Miami, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and they always seemed to involve more golf and fine dining than actual business. When Serena questioned the expenses, James would get defensive. "I'm building the brand," he would say. "These networking events are crucial for our long-term growth. You wouldn't understand because you're always buried in spreadsheets, but business development requires a certain image." What Serena did understand was that while James was building his image, She was working 16-hour days to keep the company running. She managed all client relationships, oversaw project timelines, handled hiring and firing, managed the books, and dealt with every crisis that arose. James would show up to job sites when photographers were coming or when important clients wanted to meet the CEO, but the day-to-day work of running the business fell entirely on her shoulders. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in March, when Serena was reviewing the company credit card statements and noticed a pattern of charges that didn't make sense. Expensive dinners at romantic restaurants when James was supposedly in solo business meetings. Hotel rooms upgraded to luxury suites. Charges at jewelry stores and lingerie boutiques. Her hands shook as she printed out the statements and spread them across her desk. 6 months of charges that told a story she didn't want to believe. James wasn't just traveling for business. He was traveling with someone else. That evening, she confronted him as soon as he walked through the door of their apartment. "We need to talk," she said, holding up the credit card statements. "About these charges." James glanced at the papers and his face went carefully blank. "What about them?" "The dinner for two at Le Bernardin when you said you were in a solo meeting with investors. The couple's massage at the spa in Miami. The charges at Victoria's Secret when you were supposedly at a construction conference." "Serena, you're being paranoid." "Am I?" "Then explain these charges." James was quiet for a long moment, and Serena could see him calculating his response. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold in a way she had never heard before. "Fine. You want the truth? I've been seeing someone. Her name is Crystal, and she's been helping me with client development." The words hit Serena like a physical blow. "Helping you with client development?" "She's the receptionist, James. She's 23 years old. She's smart and ambitious, which is more than I can say for some people lately." "More than you can say about your wife, you mean?" "I mean more than I can say about someone who spends all her time complaining and keeping track of every penny I spend instead of supporting the success we've built." "The success we've built?" "James, I built this company. I invested my inheritance, I work 16 hours a day, I manage everything while you play golf and take your girlfriend on vacation." "You invested money, Serena. That's not the same as building a company. I'm the one with the vision, the one with the relationships, the one who takes the risks. You just follow orders and balance books." The casual cruelty of his words left her speechless. This was the man she had loved for 8 years, the man she had sacrificed everything to support, the man who had once held her while she cried over her grandmother's death. And now he was looking at her like she was nothing more than an annoying employee. "I want her gone," Serena said quietly. "If you want to save this marriage, Crystal needs to be fired immediately." James laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're in no position to make demands, Serena. Crystal is a valuable employee and she's not going anywhere." "Then I'm going to a lawyer." "Go ahead. You'll find out pretty quickly that you don't have as much leverage as you think you do." That night, James didn't come home. Serena sat in their apartment, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal, and realized that her marriage had been over for a long time. She just hadn't wanted to see it. The next morning, she called a lawyer. 2 weeks later, James served her with divorce papers. The process server arrived at 7:30 a.m. on a Thursday morning, just as Serena was getting ready to leave for another day of managing the company that James was now claiming she had no right to. She opened the door expecting a delivery, maybe supplies for one of their current projects. Instead, she found herself staring at a manila envelope that would change her life forever. "Serena Carter?" the young man asked, checking his clipboard. "Yes. You've been served. Have a good day, ma'am." Serena stood in her doorway, holding the envelope as the server walked away. Her hands trembled as she tore it open, revealing a thick stack of legal documents. The first page made her knees weak. Petition for dissolution of marriage followed by Carter versus Carter, in bold black letters. But that wasn't the worst part. As she flipped through the pages, she discovered that James wasn't just divorcing her. He was also suing her. The allegations were breathtaking in their cruelty and creativity. According to the lawsuit, Serena had embezzled money from Carter Home Solutions, damaged the company's reputation through erratic and unprofessional behavior, and breached her fiduciary duty as an employee. The documents claimed she had no legal ownership in the business and that her alleged contributions were greatly exaggerated. James was asking the court to award him sole ownership of the company, their shared assets, and monetary damages for the harm she had supposedly caused to his business. He was also requesting a restraining order that would prevent her from interfering with company operations or contacting employees. Serena sank onto her couch, reading the same paragraphs over and over, unable to believe what she was seeing. The man she had loved and supported for 8 years was not only stealing her life's work but actively trying to destroy her reputation in the process. Her phone buzzed with a text message from James. "I tried to do this the easy way. You should have taken the hint and walked away quietly. Now everyone will know what you really are." Serena stared at the message until her vision blurred with tears. Then she threw her phone across the room and screamed until her throat was raw. An hour later, she was sitting in the office of Lisa Chen, the attorney she had consulted about the divorce. Lisa was a small woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper reputation for handling complex business disputes. "This is quite a collection of allegations," Lisa said, spreading the lawsuit documents across her desk. "Your husband's attorney has been very thorough in their character assassination." "None of it's true," Serena said. "I never embezzled anything. I never damaged the company's reputation. I built that company from nothing." "I believe you," Lisa said. "But believing you and proving it in court are two different things. Tell me about your role in the business from the beginning." For the next 2 hours, Serena laid out the entire history of Carter Home Solutions. She explained her initial investment, her decision to quit her job, her grandmother's inheritance, and all the unpaid work she had done over the years. She showed Lisa emails, bank records, and business documents that proved her integral role in the company's success. "Do you have any documentation showing your ownership stake in the business?" Lisa asked. "James always said we would make it official later. He kept promising to have lawyers draw up partnership papers, but there was always some excuse for why it wasn't the right time." Lisa nodded grimly. "That's a common tactic. Keep the real partner in limbo with promises while building a case that they were just an employee. So I have no legal claim to the business I built?" "I didn't say that. Your financial contributions alone give you a strong claim, especially the inheritance money. And the fact that you worked without pay for years while contributing to the company's growth creates what we call a partnership by conduct situation." "What does that mean?" "It means that even without formal paperwork, your actions and James's actions created a business partnership. The challenge is proving it, especially when he's claiming you were just an employee." Lisa pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. "We're going to need to gather extensive documentation. Bank records, email communications, witness statements from employees and clients, business registration documents, tax filings, everything that shows your role in building and running this company." "What about his affair? Doesn't that matter?" "It matters for the divorce but probably not for the business dispute unless we can show he used company funds for personal expenses related to the affair." "Did he?" Serena thought about the credit card statements she had discovered. "Yes. He used the company card for expensive dinners, hotel rooms, gifts, all for his girlfriend. That could be very useful. Misusing company funds for personal expenses is a breach of fiduciary duty. If we can document a pattern of that behavior, it strengthens your case significantly." As they talked, Serena began to understand the scope of what she was facing. This wasn't just a divorce or even a simple business dispute. James had been planning this attack for months, possibly years, carefully positioning himself to take everything while leaving her with nothing. "There's something else you should know," Lisa said as their meeting was winding down. "I've dealt with James's attorney before. Richard Blackwood is known for taking cases where he thinks he can destroy the opposing party completely. He doesn't just win, he annihilates." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your husband didn't just decide to divorce you. He declared war on you. And he hired the most ruthless attorney in the city to make sure you don't survive it." Serena felt a chill run down her spine. "So what do we do?" Lisa smiled, and for the first time since receiving those papers, Serena felt a spark of hope. "We fight back harder than they expect. We gather evidence they don't know we have. And we remind them that sometimes the person who looks weakest is actually the most dangerous." "You think we can win?" "Serena, you built a multi-million-dollar company from a $5,000 investment while your husband was playing golf and cheating on you. If anyone can win this fight, it's you." As Serena left the lawyer's office that afternoon, she realized something important had changed. For 8 years she had been the supportive wife, the understanding partner, the woman who put everyone else's needs before her own. She had been kind when she should have been firm, generous when she should have been cautious, and trusting when she should have been suspicious. But that woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. James had spent years underestimating her, treating her like a subordinate instead of a partner. He was about to learn exactly how big a mistake that had been. The war room Lisa Chen set up in her law office looked like something out of a crime drama. The conference table was covered with bankers' boxes full of documents, The walls were lined with timeline charts and financial spreadsheets, and a whiteboard in the corner was covered with names, dates, and connections drawn in different colored markers. Business litigation is like putting together a jigsaw puzzle while your opponent is trying to hide half the pieces, Lisa explained as she and Serena worked through their third box of bank records. But your husband made a crucial mistake. He assumed you were just along for the ride all these years. He didn't realize you were documenting everything. Serena had always been organized by nature, but running Carter Home Solutions had turned her into a documentation machine. She had copies of every email, every contract, every invoice, and every bank statement from the past 8 years. What had started as simple good business practices had become the foundation of her legal defense. Look at this, she said, pulling out a folder thick with correspondence. These are emails between James and our biggest client, Morrison Development. Every single one goes through me. He would get the initial contact, then forward everything to me to handle. I negotiated the contracts, managed the timeline, solved all the problems. Lisa reviewed the emails, highlighting key passages. This is gold. Morrison clearly considered you the point person for their projects. And look at this one from their CEO. Serena, James is lucky to have you running things. You're the most professional project manager we've ever worked with. James always said I was just supporting him, but the clients saw something different. Clients usually know who's really running the show. We need to interview Morrison and your other major clients. Their testimony about your role could be crucial. While Lisa worked on building their case, Serena found herself discovering things about her own company that she had never realized. The financial records told a story of a business that had grown steadily under her management while James's personal spending had grown exponentially. Your husband has been treating the company like his personal piggy bank, Lisa said, reviewing the credit card statements. Look at this pattern over the past 2 years. Company card charges at expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, jewelry stores, spa treatments, all during his business trips with Crystal. How much are we talking about? Lisa pulled out her calculator and started adding figures. Conservatively? About $80,000 in clearly personal expenses over the past 2 years. And that's just what's obvious from the credit card statements. $80,000? That's embezzlement, Serena. He's accusing you of stealing from the company while he was actually doing it himself. The irony would be funny if it weren't so infuriating. As they dug deeper into the financial records, they discovered something even more disturbing. James had been quietly moving money out of the business and into personal accounts that Serena didn't have access to. This transfer here, Lisa said, pointing to a bank statement from 3 months earlier. $50,000 moved from the business operating account to an account I can't identify. Do you know anything about this? No. James always said he was handling the banking and that I should focus on operations. We need to find out where this money went. If he's been hiding assets in preparation for the divorce, that's a serious problem. Lisa called in a forensic accountant named David Park, a quiet man in his 50s who specialized in tracking hidden assets in divorce cases. Within a week, he had uncovered a web of financial moves that painted a clear picture of James's planning. Your husband has been very busy, David reported to Serena and Lisa. He's opened 3 new bank accounts, purchased a condo in Miami that's not in his name, and invested in several business ventures that he hasn't disclosed. The total value of hidden assets appears to be around $400,000. $400,000? Serena felt sick. That's company money. It gets worse, David continued. I found evidence that he's been planning to declare the company bankrupt and then restart it under a new name with Crystal as his partner. He's been moving the best clients to a shell company he set up 6 months ago. Lisa slammed her hand on the table. That's fraudulent transfer. He's trying to steal the entire business and leave you holding an empty shell. The full scope of James's betrayal was breathtaking. This wasn't just a divorce or even a business dispute. It was a carefully orchestrated plan to steal everything Serena had built while destroying her reputation in the process. What can we do? Serena asked. We can stop him, Lisa said grimly. But we need to move fast. If he succeeds in transferring all the assets, it will be much harder to recover them. Over the next 2 weeks, Lisa and her team worked around the clock to prepare their counterattack. They filed emergency motions to freeze all business assets, prevent James from transferring any more money, and stop him from interfering with company operations. They also filed their own lawsuit, accusing James of embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraudulent transfer of assets. The morning they served James with their papers was the first time Serena had felt truly powerful in years. She imagined him opening that envelope, reading their allegations, and realizing that his carefully laid plans were falling apart. Her phone rang 30 minutes after the process server left James's office. "You have no idea what you just started." James's voice was cold with fury. "Actually, you started this when you decided to steal my life's work," Serena replied calmly. "I'm just finishing it." "You think you can win this? You think anyone will believe that you built this company? You were nothing when I met you, and you'll be nothing when this is over. We'll see about that. I have the best lawyer money can buy, and I have resources you can't even imagine. You're going to lose everything, and then you're going to wish you had just walked away quietly." "James, there's something you should know about me after all these years," Serena said. "I don't walk away from fights. Especially when I know I'm right." She hung up and immediately called Lisa. "He's going to escalate," she told her attorney. "This is going to get ugly." "Good," Lisa said. "I was hoping he would. Angry people make mistakes, and we need him to make as many mistakes as possible." That evening, Serena sat in her apartment. The same apartment where she had cried over the divorce papers just a month earlier, and realized how much she had changed. The woman who had spent 8 years supporting someone else's dreams was gone. In her place was someone who was finally ready to fight for her own. James had made one crucial miscalculation. He thought that because he had treated her like an employee, she would act like one when challenged. He expected her to be intimidated by his threats and overwhelmed by his resources. He had forgotten that she was the woman who had built his empire while he was playing golf. And if she could build one empire, she could certainly destroy the man who had tried to steal it from her. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Crystal Martinez, the 23-year-old receptionist who had been James's affair partner and supposed business development assistant, walked into Lisa Chen's office on a Tuesday morning looking nervous and carrying a box of documents. "I need to talk to someone about James Carter," she said to the receptionist. "I think I made a big mistake." An hour later, Crystal was sitting across from Serena and Lisa, tears streaming down her face as she confessed to her role in James's scheme. "I'm so sorry," she said, looking directly at Serena. "I didn't know how much you had done for the company. James told me you were just an employee who was trying to take credit for his work." "What changed your mind?" Lisa asked. "I found out he's been lying to me too," Crystal said, pulling documents from her box. "He promised he was going to marry me after the divorce, that we would run the new company together as equal partners. But yesterday I found these." She handed over a thick folder of legal documents. Lisa's eyebrows rose as she reviewed them. "What am I looking at?" Serena asked. "Incorporation papers for a new company called Premier Home Solutions," Lisa said. "James is listed as sole owner." "Crystal, where did you get these?" "They were in his desk drawer at the office. Along with these bank statements for accounts I didn't know existed." The bank statements painted a clear picture of James's financial planning. Over the past 6 months, he had been systematically moving money from Carter Home Solutions into accounts controlled only by him. The total amount was staggering, over $600,000. "There's more," Crystal continued. "James has been telling clients that the company is changing ownership and that they should sign new contracts with Premier Home Solutions. He said you were leaving the business, Serena, and that it would be better to work with the new company." "How many clients has he moved over?" Lisa asked. "At least 12 major accounts, including Morrison Development. He told them you were having personal problems and that it would be better to work directly with him." Serena felt sick. Morrison Development alone represented over $500,000 in annual revenue. If James had successfully moved them and 11 other major clients to his new company, he would have effectively stolen the entire business. "Why are you telling us this?" Serena asked. Crystal looked embarrassed. "Because I realized I was being used just like you were. James doesn't care about me any more than he cared about you. He just wanted someone he could control while he stole everything." "What made you realize that?" "I overheard him on a phone call yesterday with his lawyer. He was laughing about how easy it had been to manipulate both of us. He said you were too trusting and I was too young and stupid to see what he was really doing." The betrayal in Crystal's voice was real, and Serena found herself feeling sorry for the young woman despite everything that had happened. "Will you testify about what you saw and heard?" Lisa asked. "Yes. I have copies of emails, financial records, client correspondence, everything. I was supposed to destroy them, but something told me to keep copies." Over the next few hours, Crystal provided a detailed account of James's activities over the past 6 months. She had been present for phone calls where he had lied to clients about Serena's role in the company. She had seen him forge Serena's signature on documents. She had even been asked to help him create fake emails that would make it look like Serena had been embezzling money. "He's been planning this for a long time," Crystal said. "He told me that women like you always think they deserve more than they earn, and that the only way to deal with that kind of entitlement was to cut it off at the source." "Cut it off at the source?" Serena repeated. "He said he was going to make sure you never worked in this industry again. He was planning to spread rumors about your professional conduct, maybe even file criminal charges for embezzlement." Lisa and Serena exchanged looks. James wasn't just trying to steal the business. He was trying to destroy Serena's entire professional reputation. "There's something else," Crystal said, pulling out her phone. "I recorded some of our conversations. I was starting to get suspicious and I wanted to protect myself." She played several audio recordings of James discussing his plans. In one, he bragged about how easy it had been to convince Serena to invest her inheritance. In another, he laughed about her working without pay for years while he built relationships with other women. The most damaging recording was a conversation where he explicitly discussed his plan to bankrupt Carter Home Solutions and move all the assets to his new company. "This is incredible," Lisa said. "These recordings prove conspiracy, fraud, and criminal intent. Crystal, you may have just saved Serena's entire case." By the end of the day, they had enough evidence to not only defend against James's allegations but to file serious criminal charges against him. The forensic accountant had traced the hidden assets, Crystal had provided insider testimony about his fraud, and the audio recordings proved his intent to destroy Serena. "What happens now?" Serena asked as they prepared to leave Lisa's office. "Now we go on the offensive," Lisa said. "Tomorrow morning, we're filing amended complaints that include criminal fraud charges. We're also requesting emergency injunctions to stop him from operating Premier Home Solutions and to freeze all his personal assets." "Will it work?" "Serena, 3 weeks ago your husband thought he had you cornered. He had the better lawyer, more resources, and what he thought was a foolproof plan. But he made one critical mistake." "What's that?" "He assumed that everyone around him was as dishonest as he is. He never considered that Crystal might develop a conscience, or that his own employees might be loyal to you instead of him." As Serena drove home that evening, she realized that the scared, betrayed woman who had received those divorce papers 6 weeks earlier was gone forever. In her place was someone harder and smarter. Someone who had learned that the best way to deal with a bully was to hit back twice as hard. James had taught her an important lesson about trust and betrayal. Now she was about to teach him an equally important lesson about the consequences of underestimating the woman who had built his empire. The war was far from over, but for the first time since this nightmare began, Serena knew she was going to win. The courtroom was packed on the morning of the final hearing. Word had spread through the local business community about the Carter case, and everyone wanted to see how the battle between the successful contractor and his wronged wife would end. Serena sat at the plaintiff's table with Lisa Chin, surrounded by boxes of evidence that told the story of 8 years of building, supporting, and ultimately being betrayed. Across the aisle, James sat with his expensive attorney Richard Blackwood, looking confident despite everything that had been revealed over the past month. He wore his best suit and his most charming smile, clearly believing he could still convince the judge that this was all a misunderstanding. Judge Patricia Reynolds entered the courtroom with a stern expression that suggested she had already reviewed the extensive pretrial filings. She was known for her no-nonsense approach to complex business disputes and her particular dislike of anyone who tried to manipulate the legal system. "This case has generated quite a bit of paperwork," Judge Reynolds said as she settled at the bench. "Before we begin, I want to make it clear that I've reviewed all the filings, exhibits, and depositions. This hearing is to determine the facts and render judgment on the claims and counterclaims." Lisa stood first to present Serena's case. "Your Honor, this is a story about a woman who spent 8 years building a business while her husband took all the credit and planned to steal everything she had created. The evidence will show that James Carter systematically embezzled from his own company, committed fraud against clients, and attempted to destroy his wife's livelihood out of pure greed." She walked the judge through Serena's initial investment, her decision to quit her job and work without pay, the inheritance money that had funded the company's expansion, and the years of unpaid labor that had built Carter Home Solutions into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. "Mrs. Carter didn't just invest money, Your Honor. She invested her life. While her husband was playing golf and having affairs, she was working 16-hour days to keep their business running." Lisa presented the financial records that showed James's personal spending from company accounts, the hidden assets he had tried to conceal, and the shell company he had created to steal clients. She played portions of the audio recordings where James discussed his fraudulent plans, and she presented testimony from Crystal Martinez about his scheme to destroy Serena's reputation. The defendant didn't just commit adultery, Your Honor. He committed theft on a massive scale while trying to convince this court that the victim was the criminal. When Richard Blackwood stood to present James's defense, it was clear he was fighting an uphill battle. The evidence against his client was overwhelming, and the best he could do was try to minimize the damage. Your Honor, while my client admits to some personal indiscretions, the business was his vision and his creation. Mrs. Carter was a supportive spouse, but the idea that she was an equal partner in building this company is simply not supported by the facts. But the facts were exactly what supported Serena's case. When Blackwood tried to argue that her financial contributions were just loans, Lisa presented documents showing they were investments in exchange for partnership promises. When he claimed she was just an employee, Lisa presented client testimonials praising her leadership and expertise. The most damaging moment for James came when Judge Reynolds asked him directly about the audio recordings. Mr. Carter, I've listened to recordings where you discuss plans to bankrupt your company and steal clients for a new business. How do you explain that? Your Honor, those conversations were taken out of context. I was just exploring options for the future of the business. Options that included defrauding your wife and stealing company assets? James's confident demeanor began to crack. I was protecting the business from someone who was trying to destroy it. By destroying it yourself? The judge's tone made it clear she wasn't buying James's explanations. The hearing lasted 3 days with testimony from employees, clients, suppliers, and business partners. Every witness painted the same picture. Serena was the driving force behind Carter Home Solutions' success, while James was increasingly absent and irresponsible. Morrison Development CEO testified that he had always considered Serena his primary contact and that James's attempt to move their contract to a new company had seemed suspicious and unprofessional. 3 former employees testified that Serena had been their real boss, handling everything from hiring to training to performance reviews, while James rarely appeared at the office except for photos and client meetings. Even the company's accountant admitted that Serena had been the one managing the books and that James had often asked him to hide certain transactions from her. By the end of the 3rd day, James's case had completely collapsed. The evidence of his fraud was overwhelming, and his attempts to paint Serena as an opportunistic employee had been thoroughly debunked. This court will recess for deliberation, Judge Reynolds announced. I'll render my decision tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. That night, Serena couldn't sleep. After months of fighting, everything came down to one judge's decision. Lisa had assured her that the case was strong, but Serena had learned not to count on anything until it was final. The next morning, the courtroom was even more crowded than before. Judge Reynolds entered with a thick folder of notes and a serious expression. I've rarely seen a case with such clear evidence of systematic fraud and betrayal, she began. The defendant's actions show a pattern of deception that goes far beyond marital infidelity into criminal behavior. She looked directly at James. Mr. Carter, you have not only betrayed your wife's trust, but you have committed fraud against your own business, your clients, and this court. Your attempts to portray yourself as the victim while systematically stealing from the company your wife built is one of the most egregious examples of bad faith I've encountered. Serena felt her heart racing as the judge continued. In the matter of business ownership, I find that Mrs. Carter's financial investments, unpaid labor, and operational control establish her as a full partner in Carter Home Solutions, regardless of the formal paperwork. Her contributions were substantial and essential to the company's success. The judge awarded Serena 75% ownership of Carter Home Solutions, the family home, and $200,000 in damages for emotional distress and lost wages. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. The evidence of embezzlement, fraud, and tax evasion is overwhelming. As the gavel fell, Serena felt 8 years of pain and anger finally lift from her shoulders. She had won more than a legal case, she had won her life back. James sat stunned in his chair as the full weight of his situation became clear. He would face criminal charges, lose most of his assets, and have his professional reputation destroyed. As they left the courthouse, Lisa put her hand on Serena's shoulder. How does it feel to finally get justice? Serena looked back at the building where her new life had officially begun. It feels like I can finally breathe again. 6 months after the court decision, Serena stood in the lobby of her newly renovated office building, watching workers install a sign that read, Williams Home Solutions, in elegant gold letters. She had legally returned to her maiden name and rebranded the company to reflect its new direction. The old Carter Home Solutions was dead, and in its place was something better. Something that was truly hers. The business had not only survived James's attempts to destroy it but had thrived under her complete control. The clients James had tried to steal had returned after learning the truth about his fraud, and word of Serena's integrity and professionalism had brought in new customers faster than she could handle them. "The sign looks perfect," said Marcus Williams, the man who had become the unexpected bright spot in her new life. Dr. Marcus Williams had been her grandmother's physician in her final years, and they had reconnected when he testified as a character witness during the legal proceedings. He was nothing like James, quiet where James had been loud, honest where James had been deceptive, supportive where James had been selfish. "My grandmother would have loved this," Serena said, admiring the gleaming sign. "She always said that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what you're really capable of." Marcus smiled and squeezed her hand. "She'd be proud of what you've built." And Serena had built something impressive. Williams Home Solutions now employed 25 people, had a 6-month waiting list for projects, and had been featured in Architectural Digest as one of the country's most innovative renovation companies. The business that had started with her $5,000 investment was now worth over $5 million, and every penny of it belonged to her. The criminal case against James had concluded the previous month with a plea deal that sent him to federal prison for 3 years on charges of embezzlement, tax evasion, and wire fraud. His assets had been seized to pay restitution, and his professional reputation was completely destroyed. Crystal had testified against him in exchange for immunity, though she had moved back to her hometown in Arizona to start over. "Have you heard anything about how he's adjusting to prison life?" Marcus asked as they walked through the showroom Serena had created to display the company's work. "His lawyer says he's having a difficult time," Serena replied. "Apparently the other inmates don't have much respect for men who steal from their wives." She didn't feel sorry for James anymore. That emotion had burned out during the long months of legal battles and discovering the full extent of his betrayal. Now she felt something cleaner and more powerful. The satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. The company Christmas party that evening was held in the same conference room where James had once bragged about his networking skills and business development expertise. Now it was filled with employees who genuinely respected Serena and were proud to work for a company that treated them fairly and honestly. "I want to thank all of you for sticking with us during the transition," Serena said, raising her glass of champagne to toast her team. "This year has been challenging, but it's also shown me what we can accomplish when we work together with trust and respect." Her lead project manager, Sophia, stood up to respond. "Serena, I think I speak for everyone when I say that this company feels completely different now. We're not just employees anymore, we're part of something we can be proud of." The applause was genuine and warm. Nothing like the forced enthusiasm of the old company parties where everyone had to pretend James's obvious affairs and questionable business practices were acceptable. Later that evening, Serena and Marcus sat on the balcony of her new penthouse apartment, looking out over the city lights. She had bought the place with her settlement money, choosing the top floor of a building she had always admired. It was everything the cramped apartment she had shared with James wasn't: spacious, elegant, and completely hers. "Do you ever regret fighting so hard for the business?" Marcus asked. "You could have walked away and started fresh somewhere else." "Never," Serena said without hesitation. "That company represents 8 years of my life, my grandmother's legacy, and my professional reputation. James thought he could steal all of that and leave me with nothing. He was wrong." "What about us?" Marcus asked quietly. "Do you ever worry that you're not ready for another relationship after everything that happened?" Serena turned to look at him, this kind and patient man who had supported her through the darkest period of her life without asking for anything in return. "Marcus, James taught me the difference between someone who loves you and someone who uses you. You've been nothing but honest and supportive, even when I was too angry and hurt to be good company. You were dealing with a trauma that would have broken most people. But I didn't break. And part of the reason I didn't break is because you were there to remind me that not all men are like James." Marcus smiled and pulled her closer. "So what's next for the empire building, Ms. Williams?" "First, I'm going to expand into commercial renovation. I've already got 3 major contracts lined up for next year. Then I'm thinking about writing a book about business partnerships and what to watch out for. A cautionary tale about trusting the wrong person? More like a guide for recognizing your own worth and not letting anyone convince you to settle for less." As they sat together in comfortable silence, Serena reflected on how much her life had changed in just 1 year. 12 months ago, she had been a woman who worked without pay for a man who didn't respect her, who had invested her inheritance in someone else's dream, who had been too afraid to demand what she deserved. Now she was the owner of a multi-million-dollar company, living in her dream apartment, and in love with a man who valued her intelligence and independence. She had learned that revenge wasn't about destroying your enemies, it was about building something so successful that their attempts to harm you became irrelevant. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Lisa Chin. Saw the Architectural Digest article. Your grandmother would be so proud. You didn't just get justice, you got the life you always deserved. Serena smiled and put her phone away. Lisa was right. This wasn't just about beating James in court or recovering what he had stolen. This was about finally becoming the woman she was meant to be, successful, independent, and surrounded by people who valued her for who she was rather than what she could do for them. James had tried to take everything from her, but in the end, he had given her the greatest gift of all, the knowledge that she was strong enough to rebuild her life on her own terms. And what a beautiful life it was turning out to be.